Hello there. So today is Creatormas. So that's day 12 of Creatormas 2019, where we make some IMVU products using Blender 2.8 plus. So that's anything from 2.80 upwards. So today is Creatormas. So happy Creatormas to all IMVU, not IMVU, IMVU creators. So today we're going to revisit our rosette bow, and we're going to turn this into a clothing item of sorts. We're going to create well, it's not an outfit as such, but an outfit. So we're going to create some ribbons across there and some ribbons across there, and then we'll use the bow sitting on the top. And this will most likely be an AP product because it is unlikely that we will be able to cover all the red bits. So this is in the accessory file at the moment. So that means it has to be appended to the clothing file, which is the one that we're going to use to make clothing. So this is the accessory file. And this is the clothing file. So they're same avatar, same mesh, but different skeletons. So what we're going to do, let's open up the rosette. So first we need to double check that we've got a name that we can easily recognize. So we can do that in object properties, which we're in, and we look at the identifier or the name or the label, or we can use the outliner, and that will show our object that's selected. So we've got it set as rosette.mesh. So so at the moment then, let's look at this in so that's day 5. Just open that one. So as an accessory, it moves with spine 04, which is that bone. So that bone so that bone in IMVU controls the mesh, but as an accessory we've got an armature that represents that bone. It's set up for that, so we need to change that, but we might be able to use that in its current state as the clothing item. Whoops. So clothing file. Nope. And what we want to do is append. So file, append, and we need to find where that item is. We want the one for the female. And whilst we're appending, this acts as a zip archive, so we're essentially just drilling down into the folder. So we want the object folder that contains all the objects. Double click, and we have to find it, rosette. There it is, rosette.mesh. So select and append, and it should pop into place. save this file, save as, and this gives us our it's 10, no it's 12, 1. This gives us a base project file to return to if we need to. Save as. Right, so what we can do with this first is weight paint this object to the skeleton as it currently is. So we could weight paint this. So to weight paint, select the skeleton first and then the object second, because the weight painting values only apply to the mesh, not the skeleton, in terms of how you actually, where they are painted. And then weight paint, and the mesh will change color because it's already got a vertex group assigned to it called attachment root, so we can get rid of that. And it'll go blue, indicating that there are no groups associated with this mesh. So what we need to do now, oh hang on, that's in, is it because it's hidden? No, it's not hidden. Let me just double check something. Objects mode. Oh, it's in X-ray. Where's X-ray? Tum-ti-tum. We are in object mode, yeah. Oh, I know why. Right, so now that's the meshes. Let's try that again. Weight paint. We should be able to select the bones, but we can't for some reason. They're not showing. Oh, there, is that it? No. Because the skeleton, for some reason, is in outline view. Oh, there it is. That's what I was looking for. Honestly. Right, so yeah, so you'll have to do that for the weight painting stuff. So that's something to note. I have to note that in the files. I'll probably just update the file. So if it's in wireframe, it's a little tricky to work with. So that should work now. Nope, it's still not doing it. Most annoying. So let's have a look at the so why did that one work then? Yeah, because that's what should happen. We should be able to see, and this is the same file. So unless this is one of those weird things with Blender, because what we should see is this. The skeleton just highlights like this, and then we're able to paint, as we were doing yesterday, onto the meshes. So I can't see, and that was in wireframe as well. So let's try reset the scene. Select the armature and then the mesh. Just check. There we go. That was very, very weird. I wonder if it's something to do with bringing in an old file into Blender, or an older file into Blender, that's carrying properties from a different skeletal setup, and it's not properly overriding the file when you drop a new one in. So it looks like the best thing to do is always start with a general scene. So if you've had something open, just file, new, general, just to clear the scene so we can use this now. That's very odd. It's most annoying actually. So we should be able to now append. There it is, rosette.mesh. Right now, so hopefully this will work. So if we select the skeleton and then the mesh, nope, it's doing it again. That's very weird. I wonder if actually oh, there we go. It's because right, oh, I see what's going on. Right, so it's because that's a little weird, because you would kind of assume that you'd be able to automatically associate a skeleton with a mesh, regardless as to what the mesh may already be associated with. But it looks like you have to make a data link between the skeleton that you want to weight paint to the mesh before you can actually weight paint it to the mesh. So if there's another skeleton associated with an object that you append, you have to remove that association. So that means either deleting the armature itself and or resetting the armature modifier. So with the mesh selected, armature properties, not armature properties, modifier properties, you'll get your armature properties panel. Just reset the object. So click that, and then for clothing we've only got one armature, so this is relatively straightforward. So it's female 03 master root. So that then should mean we can weight paint this, and it does. So what all of that just to do, oh, we need to get rid of that, delete that, don't need that. So we are selecting the spine, and we're just going to paint over. And this is the double layered version, so it's going to make the mesh look a little bit odd. Or a quick way to do this would be to, so we've already got the group created automatically because we've got that bone selected and we're painting everything. So an alternative way to do this was, because we now have that vertex group, we could select the mesh, edit mode, select all, and then just in the vertex group section we've now got this assign button, and we can click that and it assigns everything to that mesh, because remember we have it double-sided. So when we go back to select skeleton, it's then all red. So that now means that moving that bone now moves the mesh with it. So we do a bit more vertex painting. So this can be a little tricky when you've got a double-sided mesh. Because access to the vertexes to paint them can be obscured because of the way that the object is being drawn on screen. Let's add a final group here. That's better. Right, so With that done, what we can do now is add some, we can use the same textures. So let's just save that file, save as. Where's number 2? Creator mass 2019 12 2. Right, so save that. Right, we want to add a mesh to this, and we need it to be roughly, probably the best thing is a cylinder, but we could use a cube either way. Let's add a cube. So add cube. That's at the feet of the avatar and it's really tiny, so we need to scale that. Scale that up. Then we can just start editing. I'm going to use the shortcut keys because it's quicker. So add a cut. Cut. We just want to block in the shape, the initial shape that we're after. Let's hide the ribbon. So we need to add another couple of loop cuts. So I'll just use the shortcut key, which is Control R, because it's quicker. And then we can place the ribbon, and we want to place this more or less where we're following the shape of the avatar, because we want this to deform with the avatar. So there's a, if we turn on wireframe actually, so select the avatar torso, viewport display, wireframe. So that's what we have to approximate with the structure of the ribbon. So we've got a main polygon structure that we have to kind of follow with our mesh. And that ensures that the object will deform properly when the avatar deforms. We don't have to sit exactly on the avatar because we need to accommodate different body shapes. So as we can see here, there's an intersection there because there's a loop cut that goes all the way down there. So we have to add one to our structure that replicates that. So we can get rid of the top and the bottom because we don't need those. So a quick way of doing this is to select the front face or any of the side faces, doesn't matter which. We should be able to do edge. No, it's not edge, it's mesh. Where is it? No, sorry, it's select. Select loops, edge loop. And that's selected the edges. What we want is an edge ring. That's very weird. So what we want to do then, let's do this with the shortcut key. So it's Alt click and it selects the loop. So double check that. So Alt click and it selects the loop. And then what we can do is Control I, invert selection, and just delete those. We don't need them. So yeah, it's even for seasoned Blender users, the switch from 2.8 to the from the old versions is as confusing to seasoned users of the application as it is to new users. So we need a loop cut there, and we'll need one on the other side. So we want to add one. Oh, actually no, before that, let's pull this in a bit closer to the avatar. And all we're doing now is just basically vertex pushing. So we're pushing the vertexes into position. To give us the shape that we need. some areas are going to be more structurally dense, whoops, than other areas because of the shape of the avatar. So let's just add a material to this. So material, we've already got the ribbon textures imported with the rosette that was imported, so we can select those and it'll apply. Just do a quick correction of the UV map. And we'll want to split this. Let's split it down the side, because that won't be as visible. So we need to add a seam, Control E, mark seam. That marks a seam. That will now mean that we can lay the ribbon out as a strip. So select all, unwrap. Oh, let's try object, apply, rotation and scale, and then do that again. Nope, it's still sideways, so we'll have to do some manual editing of the UV map. So there isn't a quick way to do this, unfortunately. But there is a widget tool now that, whoops, makes it a little easier to do. Let's just do a rough placement. That's okay. So we need to make sure that I think it's in UVs. UVs, snap to pixels. We want corner enabled, and what this does, so if that's disabled, the vertexes move freely within the space that we're allotted. But as we can see from the pixelation that we've got on our image here, zooming in, we can see that we have definite, well-defined areas based on the pixels. And we can use this to our advantage, because what will sometimes happen is that depending on, I don't know if IMVU actually does this, but depending on the way that textures are rendered and UV maps are rendered, the coordinates, when they are not aligned to the pixel, are, what's the word? They're not whole numbers, they're fractions, decimal fractions. And to make the thing, to make processing data more efficient, it's preferable that they be whole numbers, which in this instance would mean snapping to a corner of a vertex. Otherwise, the vertex may be smack bang in the middle or just off to one side. So that's a non-uniform number. Is that the word? There's a word for it, but can't remember what it is off the top of my head. So ideally, what you want to do is enable snap to corner. And what that does is it now snaps the vertices to corners, and it makes the vertex placement on the texture much more precise. It's also easier for the engine to render the results because it's using fixed whole numbers. So we'll just line these up using the grid snap or pixel snap, because we can get away with this on this particular type of product. So that's where the seam actually is. But because of the way the texture has been made, it comfortably tiles or wraps around the mesh without there being any issues there. So what we've got is the two sides are identical, so over this seam there's no difference in the pixels, so it'll comfortably tile around there. So what we can do now, because we've got that, object, smooth shading, that just smooths out the shading, but what we can do now is do a little bit of tweaking. And then so what we can do then is object mode. We can copy this, object, duplicate objects, and we can reposition this one so that we have another layer, so to speak, of our ribbon texture. So now we want to decide how. So let's no, that's okay because we can hide the. Right, so round the back, we need to edit this. So this sits outside the main ribbon. Because what we can do, we don't need to get too bothered with cloth folds or the crossover where a ribbon is going to fold across itself as you wrap it around something, because we can hide that underneath the rosette, because the rosette will sit on top of this. Where is that? So if the rosette sits on top of that, so you don't know where the overlap is. So we need to fix the arm under there. Smush that down. Go back into the first one, do some editing to that. I think we're going to have to add a loop cut from about there, I guess, round the front, because we've got to account for the shape of the boob. Have to do this on both sides, so edges. So those 4, so on the same on the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4. just split those. So now we've got a bit more shape we can play around with. And yes, this is how you would do undergarments. Yeah, we'll see how that works. So we need to convert these faces to triangles so that we alleviate the stress that's on them. Unhide the second one, and we'll need to do the same thing to that, so that these edges and these edges split, and that gives us more structure that we can play around with. Yeah, that looks okay. Might drop this down a bit more. So keeping these sections separate just makes it easier to select the elements from each mesh, because when they are joined together it can be quite tricky to select vertexes, edges, faces, whatever element is being selected and manipulated. It can be quite tricky to select them without over selecting. So there's no specific need to join the meshes up just yet, because that's something that can always be done later anyway. Right, so there we go. So we put the thing back in place. So what we might need to do now is start modifying this a little bit so that it fits, it hides, I should say, under the rosette. So we've got a bit of the first one poking out through there, so we'll have to go back to that. Or alternatively, what we could do is edit the rosette, depending on how far back we can go before we start cutting into the underlying structure of the avatar and revealing that. So let's try that. So edit the first one first. See if we can hide some of that. Ooh, it's going to be close. That just about works, although there's a big chunk there. There's a big chunk here. So we'll have to modify the rosette. So select that. We have to remember that we have two layers here, so we have to enable X-ray so that we can select through the mesh. So there are two vertexes, because we've got this as a double layered mesh. There are two vertices that are coincidental. They occupy the same space as each other. So if X-ray is not enabled, it is disabled, you can only select one at a time. And depending on the position of the mouse relative to the scene, you'll select the front or the back. So in order to drill through and select both of them, just enable the X-ray feature and you'll be able to select both of them. So that's click, shift click. I wonder if we can use this yet. No. What about normal? No. Oh well. Let's do it. Whoops. That's quite a mess of surfaces. So how do we... So that's those two. And we're still poking through. So go back to that. Back to the ribbons. So that looks about right. So there we go, that's that. So yes, as was being said, don't need to join these together at the moment. Just keep them separate. Makes it easier just to manipulate each of the sections on their own. So we need to relieve the stress on that one. That one, and yeah, it's that one. Right, so copy the first one, Duplicate. In fact, we could probably use them both. Because would you... Because we then have to figure out how... Oops. So you've got the top section, but how would you then want that to... Do you want that to then spiral down to the bottom section? Because you can't just really have the bottom part necessarily in isolation of the top without having to work out what you need to do with the crossover. So the ribbon has to start somewhere, and as it's wound around the body, so if it starts here, it winds around it, you've got to figure out how tightly that does that, and or where the start and the end is. So let's just save this while we are contemplating that. Save as number 3. So let's assume if it starts at the front, because an alternative way to do this what would be an alternative way to do this? Would be to start with a plane, which again is down at the feet and it's super tiny. So if you wanted to be more accurate, what you would do is edit mode, edge, extrude, whoops, extrude, so you could do it this way. And just block out some basic shapes, or a basic shape. So you have your basic screw or spiral. So let's hide these two for the moment. Start at the top. then what would you do? Maybe go back up and do something where this looks as if it's tucked under one of the edges. So we can hide this bit underneath the rosette. So it's a little messy. But it gets your, whoops, it gets the basic shapes in place. So you start off with something as crude as that, and then yeah, that would work. Right, so that's on the inside. That one comes out. Save as. This is a completely different version, so I guess it would be a question of preference and or what type of product you are describing with your mesh. But I suspect that this one may be slightly more tricky to weight paint. Let's hide that. Hide that. Hide that. So what we're doing is just following the contours, the very basic contours of the avatar, and we're aligning. So it's not just a question of manipulating your edges or your vertexes so that they are perpendicular to the avatar. You actually want to rotate them to follow the sort of the general profile of the edge flow of the mesh. But as with the other projects, just start off with something that's relatively structurally simple, and then work up the complexity as you go along, as you work through the project, because you don't want to be in a situation where you have too much structure. You're trying to move that when you've got a lot of other things that you're trying hard not to. Whoops. Unhide those. Add a loop, whoops, there. Add a loop there. And this is going to be absolute murder to UV unwrap. So extrude, extrude, and then we can hide this under we can hide that under the rosette. So like that. So again, we'd need to add some more structure here so that we can bend that without revealing the boob, and same on the other side, although to a lesser degree. So we'd have to split that edge, or those edges, so that we can push that backwards. So let's see how far we can get with this. The first version, so this one, whoops, that works okay if you want a separate top and a bottom. So you could have, I don't know how you would join them up, but you could have a smaller rosette down at the bottom or at the sides or somehow. But that would give you two products essentially, a top and a bottom. Whereas doing it the way that we're doing it now currently, that's all one item. So when we get this, when this is brought into IMVU, it will likely be a product that's replacing the top. So it'll be overriding the top and the bottom. Whoops. And this is why it starts to get tricky when you make your meshes all inclusive, because you've now got to do a lot more scene manipulation in order to pick some elements out so that you can then manipulate them. Hide the rosette. Whoops. Let's hide these for the moment. So something that you will need to consider with products like this is that whilst you may consider this to be a relatively fun and innocent product, for want of a better word, because, oops, because it doesn't properly hide the minimum coverage texture, which is this thing with all the red bits all over it, the avatar skin. Because it doesn't hide that, this will be an AP product, even though there's nothing particularly overtly AP about it. The fact is that because it does not cover the minimum coverage guides in a way that none of the red areas, because what you should be doing is covering the red areas so they're not visible at all. But because this product does not do that, it is considered an AP product, which means that you will have to submit it as an AP item. Otherwise it'll be flagged and re-rated. So we can unhide that lot. So what we want to do, I guess, would be... So what we could do here is take this, pull it up underneath there, do a bit more extruding, and then what we'll be able to do is maybe, whoops, rotate it and extrude a bit down so it looks as though this has been pulled up through the inside and is just draped over. So that's the top. So what we're doing is going underneath and then folding over the top. So we need to give ourselves a bit more structure to play with. And we don't need to make this we don't want this to be collapsed too much because it's a stiff ribbon. Oops. Or what we can do, undo that, undo, 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 undo. We'll pull this round the back so we give the object essentially a tail. So if we just line those we align those loosely, just pull that down. We can always adjust that in a minute. Whoops, wrong ones. Those two. So we need to add some more structure here. Or would you go around the front over the top? Whoops. And then underneath from the back. Decisions, decisions. Because you then have to change how the wrap works. So if you go through the back, so if this is a tail essentially, you have to change the way the wrap works. Whereas if it's just over the side, you could do that. You can just do what we were doing, which is go in from the underside and just have the wrap. Whoops. Folding over this section. There's that edge. So it just folds over. So we go under and over. So that pops out at the side. Whoops. Right, so that goes underneath. Where's the edge for that? There it is. So that is kind of what you'd have to do. That's a challenge and a half, is that? Yeah, that's quite a challenge. And you want to pay 300 credits for this? I don't think so somehow. I should, Coco. Right, so that would be your basic party wrap. So let's just save that. We're not going to get time to do this as a export this. So what I might do, we'll just do a material and take a quick look at the UV map, and then what I might do is finish this offline, and then make the files available with the not zip file, with the video. So we need the wireframe so we can see what we're doing. We want object, shade smooth, so it's a ribbon. Material, we've got a material so we can use our ribbon. Let's use the red one, red ribbon. And it's already got the UV map partially sorted out because of what's assigned to it by default. So if we go into UV editing, whoops, select all. So that's that. Where's that vertex? Oh, well, yeah, we're going to have to properly unwrap this. So select all. And you can hold the mouse, if you have the mouse over the UV editor and press the U key, it'll, see, that's the UV map. That's why I said this is going to be hell to pay come time to unwrap this, because we now have to unwrap that. Because what we have to do to that, we have to do to that what we did to these. So we have to edit that UV map so that looks like that. So yeah, that's not going to be done in any short time at all. That's the problem with doing this sort of editing, is that the UV maps just get completely screwed up. So yes, this will have to be done offline. I'll finish this offline and then upload the files, the Blender files, for anyone that wants them to have a look at them and play around with them. But that in essence is two ways of making a ribbon product. So the first one will, hang on, let me just rename this to make it easier. The first one is easier to do because you're using shorter sections. And you can just duplicate them that makes it much easier to make a product, but you do have to think about placement and how these things then relate to whatever it is that you're trying to cover. So you can get away with no overlaps or anything, but you get the impression that there's an overlap because we've got two just crossed over on one on side, one inside, the other on the outside. So the cross, where they cross, it's hidden underneath the rosette, so you don't ruin that. So you could probably just reposition the rosette a bit more so that it was down here, for example, so that it really is crossing over. But then you have to figure out how you want the bottoms, how those then relate to the product at the top. So you'll often see with some products in the catalogue that people will just put a strip down between the two of them. So I suppose what you could do for the bottom is just do a shorter version. Hang on, let me just ribbon short 3. What you could do for the bottoms is just a shorter version of this twisty thing, so you're not having to work with this really long object that's going to produce a UV map that looks like that, because that's going to be, there's going to be a lot of time spent flattening that out. I wonder if this will work. So grab that, pin it, grab that one, pin that to the corner, so that's the P key. So its counterpart, grab that, pin that to the corner. So what we're doing, don't know if this will work, is we are restricting the boundaries of the UV map. So hopefully, press the U key again. Oh no, it goes all curly. So is that because these are upside down? Let's try that. Nope, that doesn't work either. So what you can do with some UV maps is pin certain parts or areas of the UV map, and that will restrict how it unwraps. But it doesn't look as though we're going to be able to do that with this. It wants to curl back on itself because of the way the UVs, because of the way the mesh is structured. So that's the disadvantage with doing these types of more complicated structures. But you could make a shorter version, and that would be your bottom section. These other bits would be your top. So yes, I'll finish this offline and make the files available for anyone to have a look at and play around with. But that was our AP-ish, a rather saucy product for Creator Mass. Right, on that note, thanks for lurking and watching. And here endeth Creator Mass 2019, where we make some products for IMVU on a seasonal theme. So I hope everyone had a wonderful Creator Mass today, and we shall see you on the next stream, which is whatever the next... It'll be Valentine's. Maybe something for Valentine's. So hopefully we'll see you in between. But for now, cheerio.